Hello everyone, this is Caleb Simpson, and you're watching my walkthrough for The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild for Nintendo Wii U and Switch. So this particular video is going to be covering just Ridgeland Tower and also working our way towards these stables on the far west. If you would like to see how I got here, you can refer to the previous video where I got the fastest horse in the game. So if that's encouraging to you, you can check out the previous video and then meet back with me here. So Ridgeland Tower is probably one of the scariest ones in the entire game. All these shock enemies are just awful. They do tons and tons of damage. However, you can make this totally easy mode by simply giving yourself some shock resistance. You can do this with the rubber set or just eating some shock resistant food. So fry up some zap shrooms or something, and then that will give you complete immunity to all electric damage. And that would be my biggest recommendation for this area. However, I am going to show how to get through this area hard mode, just struggling through. And how I'd recommend you do this is use cryonis to make blocks. You can do this both to get out of the water, but also to block the line of sight from other enemies that are far away so that they don't see you and come over to investigate. So in this way, what I'm doing is I'm attacking some of these yellow Lizalfos off to one side and stuff, so that these electrical Lizalfos, so that I don't have to worry about additional enemies. And just so you know, when fighting these Lizalfos, for all Lizalfos in the game, if you shoot them in the horn with an arrow, it will then do additional damage to them. It does a guaranteed crit, and it also guarantees to stun them. So ideally what you want to do is keep your distance from them, because their shock attacks will do a big area of effect that will just murder you. It's really bad. So instead, if you can keep shooting them in the horn, this will stun them really, really well. Now, I'm using a royal weapon, so as long as I'm using this royal bow, I'll do good damage even if I don't hit them in the horn, so I'm not too worried about it. Another thing you can do too, though, is because, as I just said, you stun them when you hit them in the horn, right? So if you can hit them really far away, then this will guarantee that they don't do a lot of damage to you because they can't get close to you in the first place. So a sniper bow, even if it only does 10 damage, can be really, really powerful. There's also a bunch of lightning Wizzrobes here, which are pretty bad as well. I would recommend that you stun them as soon as possible. You can do this using the Blizzard Rod, is really easy, but if you hit them with a really hard hitting attack afterwards, then you're guaranteed to kill them, which makes them a lot easier to deal with. Blizzard Rod is just so good. But anyways, if you can prevent any of these electric attacks from going off, then you're not going to take a lot of damage. But just so you know, as I've explained before when I was talking about elemental weapons in a previous video, is that the shock damage is completely separate from everything else. So even if you have a lot of armor, you will block the physical portion of the tooltip of the weapon, but you will not block the shock damage is flat, and it will cut through all of your armor. Your armor doesn't do anything for shock damage. So shock immunity will prevent that. But by the way, if you do have shock immunity, then all of these electric attacks, especially the lightning rods from the Wizzrobes, cannot hurt you at all. By the way, this is one of the few locations in the game where you can find yellow Lizalfos tails. They're just not very frequent. A lot of the Lizalfos that are wandering around here are not yellow Lizalfos specifically. The yellow ones are the ones with the, glowy electric horns that you could, there's one swimming in the water off to my right, for example. But anyways, you don't have very many of these in the game, and you need 45 yellow Lizalfos tails in order to upgrade the rubber set. So, I highly recommend that, not necessarily saying you have to kill them right now, but if you do kill someone, I highly recommend you grab their tails, because it's a very rare material that is hard to find. It's one of the harder ingredients to find in the game, in my experience. Alright, so Ridgeland Tower is a bunch... So first of all, I guess, where is Ridgeland? So just north of the Great Plateau, it kind of follows the water here and goes... And then it actually goes... And gets this little shallow lake thing. It includes that. It just gets that little thing right there, and then it follows the cliffside here, and then finally it encompasses all this cavern, all of this, and then it goes along the mountainside here, gets all the Satori Mountain and Solari Plain stuff into Light Forest, and then it comes down here to back to the water again. So this is all Ridgeland, all this stuff right here, this little triangle here. So first of all, Ridgeland Tower itself. Let's talk about this. So this is one of the nastiest places in the game as far as electric enemies, and they can be pretty scary. Now, to deal with them, what you can do is actually just get some shock resistance from food, and then you'll get a shock immunity buff. And what that'll do is it makes it so that they can't hurt you with any shock items at all. So, if they're shooting shock arrows at you, or they're, they have that big AoE in the water, it's then it makes everything electrified or whatever, then you can just be completely immune to that. You don't take any damage, and all these Wizzrobes can't hurt you at all. It's great. So, where do you get that? Also in Ridgeland, there is this spot right here, in Delight Forest, just south of Mount Satori, and to the left of the outskirts stable. There is a bunch of the shock shrooms, whatever they're called, the electric ones. So there's 11 or 15 of them. They're just all along this little spot right here. They're very easy to get, and so I think, especially early game, this is one of the best places in the game to get them. It is a little bit out of the way, but you can get a big cluster of them. They're very tightly packed together, so if you can get, whatever, you warp here, you summon your horse, and you're run over here and just hop off and be like, get them all, you're great. There's a couple other mushrooms there as well. But anyways, otherwise though too, if you want a bunch of shock shrooms, the best place to get them is over here in Akala. You can get, if you go warped here, and then you just run through the rock woods using stasis to detect where they are, and then you cancel using stasis and pick them all up, and then just keep using stasis over and over again. Ignore all the enemies. There's a bunch of Octoroks here. There's a Lionel here, which is kind of scary to avoid, but you can actually, if you just keep running, it's not that bad. But get all of the shock shrooms here, and then climb up here, avoid this Lionel as well, get all the ones here in Akala Wilds. You end up with something total like 49 of them, whatever, if you want to. This is much more of a time commitment. The enemies here are much scarier, but that is one of the better places overall to get them. This is faster, but you don't get very many of them. So if you need but if you just need a quick buff, you need 5 mushrooms real quick, you're like, hey, swing over here, you're like, hey, I got 13 of them, yay, you know what I mean? It's great. So, and this will reappear every blood moon, so it's wonderful. And you can get a pretty quick warp here, sail over, or take your horse or whatever. Anyways, once you have shock resistance, then here you are, and what happens is these enemies can't hurt you unless they actually, like, physically, these Lionels, or these, Lizalfos stab you with a spear, then unless they do that, like, nothing can really hurt you. They can shoot their little water spit at you, and that's bad, I guess, but it doesn't really hurt that much, so it's like, whatever. But all the shock stuff is really what's scary here. But if the shock doesn't do any damage to you, it doesn't matter. So, this is all great. So what you want to do is, a couple things to note, is there's a bunch of Wizrobes here, right? Now, one of the funny things is, if you kill all of the Lizalfos here, right? You kill, or at least all the ones in the water anyways, you kill them, and then you run around and gather up all the Wizrobes. Then stand on one of these platforms, and have all the Wizrobes surround you. And what happens is they're shooting you with their lightning rods, but because you're shock immune, they can't hurt you at all. But what happens is every once in a while, they summon an electric keys by themselves. Now, those electric keys can be killed very easily using, like, even just a garbage spear. You can use, like, a soldier spear. It doesn't matter. Something garbage that hits fast, you can be like, pew, 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 and you can quickly stab those keys, and they die and drop electric keys wings, which are pretty rare. Those are kind of hard to find, but this is the best place in the entire game to farm them, which is unusual. I know it's not what you expected, but give yourself shock resistance, stand here, and you can kill them in quick succession and get the 15 that you need to get all of your climbing gear upgrades. Super nice. So they're kind of hard to find, and that's why I pointed that out. Next thing to know here is there is a bunch of, well, not a bunch, there's 2 yellow Lizalfos, and they reappear every blood moon. There's one to the south, one to the north, and each one of them can be killed to get yellow Lizalfos tails, which you need like 45 of them, I want to say, off the top of my head, something like that. A ton. You need tons of them, and they're kind of hard to find, so it's awful. So anyways, this is a great spot, or one of the easiest spots in the game, because it's right next to a tower. Now, unfortunately, they are kind of awkward to fight. Shock resistance would help, but otherwise, the easiest way to kill them by far is to use a Lionel bow. So if you use one of those, especially the nicer ones, what you do is just hop off the tower, use your paraglider, and then once you get closer to them, use your bow to, like, bullet time in midair, nice and slow-mo, and shoot them in the head with 3 arrows at a time. Boom, boom, boom. Just do it in quick succession, like 3 times, and they die. It's kind of arrow expensive, but you kill them, you drop down, get their tails, and then you can grab their thunder spears. Each one of these guys has a thunder spear. This is the fastest way to get thunder spears in the entire game. So if you really like that weapon specifically, you can get 2 of them in quick succession. Just like kill the first one, warp back up, kill the first one, grab its stuff, warp back up, kill the second one, grab its stuff, warp back up, or whatever, and you're good to go. So yeah, that's all that. Shock resistance would help with that, in particular for the Wizrobes, but if you're scared of these guys, it would also help with that. I'd recommend you just keep like 1 or 2 shock resistance dishes in your inventory, just in general, just because it's nice to have, so you don't have to worry about it in case you run into shock enemies. Also, this is a Knight's Shield. Now, Knight's Shields are not super great. They're kind of like, I would say on a scale from 1 to 10, I would just call it like an 8 or a 7 or whatever. It's a pretty decent shield. It's not amazing. This one reappears every blood moon, and it's just sitting here. You just warp here, boom, grab it. There's a lot of other shields, like, say, Gerudo shields, that are just not as good. This one just has higher defense and everything. It's just a better shield. And you can get it really, really easily. There's some other places that are pretty decent in the game, but this one's just so fast, so quick, that I think it would be a shame not to mention it. Eventually, we will have access to royal weapons. We just don't have that yet. By the way, as far as Thunder Spears, if this method scares you, and especially because it kind of requires a lot of damage, you're not really capable of doing it super fast until later in the game, then other places that are good for that, there's Colosseum Ruins, which everybody knows about. However, again, Thunder Spears are only available here at the very end of the game. Until then, it's like a Knight's Spear instead. So it's just not good quality stuff. There are no elemental weapons here until late game. So similar problem. So if you're wanting one early game, the best place at that point is going to be here. And the Rowan Plain, this is technically part of Woodland actually, but just north of the Magnetoma Shrine, there is a Stalnox here at night. So come here at night, kill this guy, he always has a Thunder Spear. So early game, that's your best bet. kind of mid and late game, this is your best bet. Otherwise, just a single one down here at Coliseum Ruins for Thunder Spears specifically. Okay, next things to know. This is... Well, actually, let's talk about this. This is the best place in the game to get horses. I was talking about this earlier in this video, so you can either warp to the Magna Shrine. It's probably easier to go to Monotoma, but you can run up here, bunch of horses, hit them with an ice arrow, then stand next to them, mash the A button, climb up, and as soon as the ice arrow wears off, and then ride them back to the inn, or the stable, and see what they are. There is a, as far as stats, strength, speed, stamina, there is a 253 here, which is the fastest horse in the game. There is a 535, which is the strongest horse in the game as far as health and stamina. And then there's also a 445, which is the most well-rounded horse here. So there's a bunch of those here. There's only one of the 253s here, but there's like 2 or 3 of each one of the other types here. But anyways, really good horses with really high stats. They're awesome. I think each one of those is the best in category for a particular type of horse, depending on what you're trying to get. But yes, there are other horses that I will talk about later in the game, but this is the best overall horses in the game by far. Something else nearby that's interesting, this is sort of a notable mention. I don't really think this is a super great spot. I would recommend you go to the Magna Shrine if you're going to do this. What you do is this has like a cracked wall on the side of this cliff, and you shoot it with a bomb arrow, or like while flying near it, you drop a bomb and then detonate it below you to break the wall, and then you land in here, grab this warp point. Anyways, once you have this warp point, you can just like warp here and be like, and just land here. And what happens is there's a bunch of bokoblins, this little bokoblin encampment, and they're often asleep. But there's a bunch of weapons leaning up against logs here, and there's several of the Dragonbone Boko clubs, which is the one-hander. When they're kind of like a mid-range weapon, it's not super great. But if you're going for a bone spec, then that could be kind of cool. As a quick comment, though, just so you know that with 80% increased damage from the bone bonus, you end up doing 36 damage instead of 24 with these one-handers, which is the exact same as royal weapons, and royal weapons have more durability. So like, there's no reason to get Dragonbone Boko clubs. I'm just pointing it out just in case somebody really wants to use bone weapons, but I'm just commenting just so you know, royal weapons are better. Even with the bone bonus, royal weapons are still better in this particular category. As far as the two-handers, that's a different story. The two-handed Moblin clubs, Dragonbone Moblin clubs, are better, but the Boko clubs are not. They're just kind of okay. And so other weapons are just better, even with the bone bonus. All right, so let's talk about Ludfo's Bog and Swift Violet. So Swift Violet is the best, well, it's the highest tier 3 speed ingredient in the entire game, but I highly recommend you do not cook with it because you want to use it for upgrading your armor and stuff like that. It's one of the hardest ones to get. It's just awkward and it's a pain and it takes a long time. You need so many of them and stuff like that. So use Swift Violet, or sorry, use Fleet Lotus Seed and Hot-Footed Frogs for all your speed buffs, and then use Swift Violet for your upgrades would be my recommendation. But yeah, Swift Violet is awkward. It's, you know how like at the beginning of the game when we were on Great Plateau, we were climbing up towards the Oa Dame Shrine, there was all those like rushrooms along here that we were collecting as we were climbing up. There's that little breadcrumb trail that led up to the Oa Dame Shrine. It's a lot like that. Basically, rushrooms are in easy to climb areas, and then Swift Violets are in hard to climb areas. So if you just look at any cliffs where you're like, oh man, this looks really, really steep according to my map, chances are there's probably some Swift Violet here. So if you're looking for Swift Violet, that's what you kind of want to look for. Is like, if it looks like, you know, wow, this cliff is going to be a piece of cake, like, great, there's going to be some rushrooms here, then here, this is where there's going to be Swift Violet. You're like, oh man, so awkward. If it takes like 1 to 3 stamina wheels to reach it, there's probably going to be a Swift Violet there. But yeah, Swift Violets are actually everywhere in Hyrule. They're all over the place, actually, if you know where to look. You just look anywhere where you're like, wow, that would really be a pain in the butt to climb that, then sure enough, there's going to be a Swift Violet there, guaranteed. So that's how you know. So anyways, a couple ways you can do that, though. You can climb to it, and it's super time-consuming, super annoying. You're like up here, you jump off the edge, you get the thing, you climb back up, you use all your stamina, and then you wait. And then you hop down to the next one, you grab it, and then you climb all the way back up, or you land all the way to the bottom, and then you wait. And then you start climbing again, you grab the next one, and then you wait, and it's just awful. It's just so annoying. Or you're eating stamina food all the time, just so you can get it in the first place. Highly recommend climbing gear if you're going to do that. Otherwise, the better method is to shoot them with arrows. So what a lot of people will do is they'll do things like this. They'll stand on Jetto Bridge, and they'll be like, pew, 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 pew. And then it all lands in the water and like down here or whatever. And you hop off the bridge and you collect it all. And sometimes your arrows are collectible, sometimes they're not. But basically, if you're going to do something like that, what you want to do is 2 things. You want to get a bunch of rupees and go buy a bunch of arrows preemptively because you're going to waste a bunch doing it. And then also get a sniper bow. Now, ideally, you use something like a Phrenic Bow. By the way, a good place for that is over here next to the Shae Warbow Shrine. I realize I haven't unlocked this yet if you've been following along with me, but this is a really simple one you can get every blood moon. Warp here, you can get a Sniper Bow. Sniper Bows typically do less damage. They don't, so this one does 10, I think, off the top of my head, something garbage like that. But it has a zoom in, I think, and then off the top of my head, and it also shoots twice as far. So the fall off range of your arrows is significantly better, so you can shoot far off targets really great, which for something like this doesn't matter. We're not fighting enemies. The damage is irrelevant. We're using it to snipe these things to get them as good as possible. So that all being said, the problem with collecting them with something like this is that the stupid violets go everywhere, and you're like spending half your time just trying to find them. Like a good example of that, for example, is Hebra. There's lots of swift violets in Hebra, but they're so awkward. Like there's like lots of them in this area, but Hebra is slow. That's why it's so dense here, by the way, is because you're traveling so slowly. But they're in all the awkward places, like along here, but you shoot them and then they just tumble and they go and they land, and it's like, oh my goodness, you would have been better off just climbing. So, and likewise, like this area is like, okay, you can be down here and then shoot up towards these like platforms, whatever. And sometimes they're on the underside, so you can shoot them and then they'll land. But again, they just go tumbling through all this cliffside, and you're trying to intercept them and grab them before they go too far, and you miss them, and it's just awful. So Hebra has a lot of that. A lot of them where they just, you shoot one of them and it's just like, meow, and it just rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls forever, and finally it lands in the water, and you're like, great, well, there's no reason to chase after that. It was wasting my time. So you're better off just climbing. Likewise, this canyon has a bunch of them, but they're really high up. You could stand at the bottom of the canyon and just like run along here, shooting up at the swift violets all along here, and you can do that, and it's okay. It's not too bad. By the way, this canyon does have a bunch of shock shrooms, by the way. Not a lot of them. It's just like, okay. There's also like only wolves down here. There's like no enemies at all. So you kill the wolves, get all the shock shrooms. You could do that, by the way. Not a super great location. I'm just commenting on it because it's a thing that I think a lot of people don't know. Anyways, swift violets, the best place in the entire game to get them. I know it was a long explanation, but I'm just explaining the technique and like why it's annoying. So the best place in the entire game to get them is here in Ludfo's Bog. Big flat area, lots and lots of them, and they all just land in the shallow water, and you just run over, pick them up. So what you want to do is warp to the Ridgeland Tower, come over here, shoot one of them while it's on the ground, walk forward, take a picture of it with your camera, and then set it to your sensor object so you can see it. Because one of the problems with swift violets is because they don't really like appear on your screen until you're close enough. You know what I mean? Like the draw distance doesn't happen until you're close enough. But they're like far away. They're always far away because they're so high up or whatever, or so far below you because they're on cliffs and stuff. It's kind of how it works. So anyways, having them as a sensor object really helps for this particular ingredient by far. Anyways, they are underneath all these like stone mushroom things. So if you shoot the underside of the mushrooms and shoot all the swift violets, they fall down. So each one of these has like somewhere between 1 and 6. So you're like, bam, 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 bam. You just get there's so many of them here. So you collect them all, you're like, and then you run over here. They're all along this cliffside too. So there's like chews and octoroks appearing. So they're like, shoot at you, whatever, and you run forward. And then once all the enemies are like far enough away where they're not going to really bother you too much, you kind of strafe back and forth as you're like, pew, 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 pew. And then you collect them all. And you run forward and you do it again. Pew, 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 pew. Just keep shooting as you're walking, and you just collect them as you go. So you just keep alternating between shooting and collecting, and just, there you go. So you end up with a total of like 30 of them every blood moon. It's great. This is such a good spot. It's so amazing. Now, so anyways, that's the best place in the entire game to get swift violet by far. One of the hardest ingredients to get, in my opinion, in the game. So, other notable mentions as far as those go, by the way. Another really good spot is over here near the Dueling Peak Stable at the Ha-Da-Hamar Shrine. You stand here in the shallow water, and there's several of them, like 6 to 8, I want to say off the top of my head, on either side of this waterfall here. It's pretty high up, but you can shoot them with arrows, and then they plop down into the deeper water here. So you shoot them first, then run forward and pick up all your arrows and swift violets. Also, not necessarily a super great spot, but just kind of okay in a pinch, is if you need just a couple. In near Outskirts Stable, you can go to the Road to O Shrine, and then just south of this, there's like the other side of Colosseum Ruins. This cliffside has several of them, like 9 or 10 of them or whatever, and they're pretty high up, but you just shoot them and then walk along the road here and grab them. And that's a nice, safe spot. Again, all these places, well, those two places by far have no enemies, so it's not a big deal. And then this place has more enemies, but they're not really that hard to deal with. I could think the octoroks are by far the most annoying thing. But you kind of stay towards the outer side, and they don't usually bother you that much. It's mostly just the chews, which those are not a big deal. But anyways, yeah, if you go to those places every blood moon, you get so many swift violets, and you could eventually cook with them too. You get so many of them. As a comment, though, this does require a pretty decent amount of rupees because you are buying all those arrows. You don't get back, you don't recover all of them. So anyways, Great place. So next we have this little pool that is just east of Solari Hill and Monyetoma. This area is, this is the best place to get speed ingredients in the entire game, in my opinion, and I'll explain why. So, a couple things. Like, I consider a good farming location is close to a shrine. Ideally, there's not a lot of enemies, and there's a lot of ingredients in a very small area. So you can be like, so you can warp back here every blood moon and get all the things. That's kind of my definition of a good farming location. So this area is really, really good because what it has is it has a pretty decent amount of fleet lotus seeds. You just run through here in the shallow water, kind of zigzag back and forth, get all the things. There's also, this is one of the best places in the entire game to get hot-footed frogs, which is also a speed ingredient. So you're getting 2 of the best speed ingredients for food buffs in the entire game, and there's a bunch of them, a bunch of each, which is really, really good. So the total amount of stuff you're getting here is enough for, like, I don't know, 5 dishes plus, whatever, and you can do that every blood moon. So, you know, if you're planning on making a bunch of speed buffs, and it's something that you're addicted to that you really like, then this is definitely worth pinning. One of the best spots in the whole game. Really, really good. So again, like, not necessarily the best, like, total for just Fleet Lotus Seed, not necessarily the best total per se for Hot-Footed Frogs, although they're both really good spots. But the fact that you have both of them together means the total amount of speed stuff just in total is amazing. Really, really good. The ratio is crazy. So, super good spot. Moving on. This area is a rare talus. These are kind of hard to find. Haha, rare. They're rare. So, rare talus will give you diamonds and rubies and sapphires. So they'll always give you at least 1 diamond, if not 2 or even 3, which is super valuable. You can sell them for lots of rupees. But rubies and sapphires can be used to upgrade your equipment. So if you go to the Shae Loya Shrine or the Mijiroki Shrine, you can sail over here and do this. And that's great. You make a bunch of money and they reappear every blood moon. Now, speaking of the Mijiroki Shrine, this is one of the most annoying shrines in the entire game because the shrine quest for this is to come here at night during a blood moon and take off your clothes and stand on the platform before the blood moon ends, and then it will open up the shrine. Now, a lot of people forget about this, or they're like, oh, I'll do it eventually, and then they don't do it. It's the last shrine they need to unlock, and then they're just waiting around, like wandering around Hyrule doing random stuff, even though they've like 100% of the game. They're just waiting around because this is the last shrine they need to do. So I would highly recommend that you, like, say, put the red pin here, for example, to remind you blood moon because it's red color. You know, something like that. Another thing you can do, too, to make this a little bit easier is if you preemptively come here and put your traveling medallion icon here, then you can warp directly to the shrine before you've unlocked it. You know what I mean? So that way you can get here very quickly. So when you're like, oh no, it's a blood moon, I only have like an hour left, then you can just warp here and it's great. Now, if you don't have that, then I'd highly recommend you unlock the Moglatan Shrine on top of Mount Satori and sail over here as soon as possible and get this. I haven't mentioned it yet because we haven't, this is now we finally have the shrine, so now I'm talking about it. But anyways, you want to unlock the Mijiroki Shrine as soon as possible. Now, one quick note about this that I think a lot of people don't know is that blood moon is considered as soon as it turns night. Like, you know, you start seeing like all the smoky stuff. It's like the music gets more intense as it starts getting close to midnight. That does not define blood moon, but there is actually an effect for that, by the way. It increases your critical chance on cooking, by the way, when it starts having that intense music. But anyways, earlier on in the night, you can look up at the sky and see that the moon is red. So if the moon is red, and it's like, you know, 6 p.m. or whatever, and it's coming over the horizon, it's just starting to peek over, and it's already red, and you're like, oh, yeah, it's going to be a blood moon tonight, then warp over here, and you're fine. You can do it anywhere from, like, 6 a.m. all the way to 12 a.m., and then that's your window of opportunity for this. So, point being, if you're, like, just on the lookout, you just keep checking the sky every night, and it finally turns red, you're like, oh, okay, sweet, and then you come over here, you can unlock the shrine right away. So you're not like in that awkward position of waiting at the end of the game forever like a lot of people end up doing. So that'd be one of my big recommendations is try to go unlock the Mijiroki Shrine as soon as possible. So just look for a red moon. If the moon is red, come here. If not, then just ignore it and keep going back to your adventuring. Okay, next things. You know, here in Satori Mountain, I mentioned this before, there is a Stalnox here that has a Flame Blade. I mean, of the different fire weapons, I think Flame Blades are pretty nice. They're one of the easier ones to use, in my opinion. They're fast, so they kill frost enemies really easily. They'll kill multiple at a time. I like them for using with campfires. One of the reasons for that spear is sometimes I'll smack the ground near me because the range is so far that sometimes I just end up losing durability on accident, and I find with Flame Blades that doesn't really happen very often. So I like them for setting fires on purpose. Yeah, so anyways, for changing time of day, I really like Flame Blades, and this is a guaranteed one you can get at any point in the game. So you just kill the Stalnox at night, you get a Flame Blade. Yay! Now, Satori Mountain, in general, a lot of these pins are only good, like, early game. They have some just okay ingredients, which now we're starting to get some good farming locations for stuff. So like this, you know, we can get Complete Lotus Seed here. It's just a really good spot. So like, yeah, you can get some of them here in Rutile Lake, but there's like, you know, 4 of them or something. You're like, woo! Meanwhile, you can get whatever, 15 of them plus here. It's just a better spot. And this is like, there's enemies in here. It's annoying. It takes a long time to get to. It's just not good anymore in comparison. So anyways, a lot of these pins are kind of worthless. So this one, and this one can all probably be deleted at this point. I'm keeping them just for the sake of notable pins in general for the game, but just know these are more early game pins. Anyways, talking about these guys. So the ones that are worth keeping are these 3, in my opinion, and also this one. This one is one of the best places in the game to get shock arrows. Shock shrooms. I was talking about it earlier, just south of Delight Forest, along the sides. These 3 are, this is Enduring Carrots here and here, and there's also a couple Silent Princess here. Silent Princess is whatever, we can get those easily enough, doesn't really matter. But the Enduring Carrots, this is the best place in the game to get them by far. Most of the fairy fountains have 3 each, so this one, and then meanwhile the Gerudo one, by the way, has 4 of them. It's the only one that has 4. And then these, though, there's 4 at each one of these, so there's 8 total at Satori Mountain. So these are good throughout the entire game. Those are the best enduring ingredients in the game, and there's the most plentiful here at Satori Mountain. Meanwhile, this is the best place in the entire game to get hardy durians. There's like 11 of them here. This little teeny area, it feels like it's tucked off to one corner to me. The terrain, even though it doesn't look like that way on the map, the terrain feels to me like it leads you down this way, and then otherwise it leads you up this way is what it feels like to me. So this is kind of like out of sight, out of mind to me, so I always forget it's here, but this is a really good spot. So if you just make a habit of like every blood moon, you just be like, bam, 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 you'll get the best hardy ingredients and best enduring ingredients in the game every blood moon. You get 8 of these and 11 of these. Boom, every single blood moon. Awesome. So if you just do that every blood moon, you're like just casually doing it, and then by the time you're ready to start cooking dishes that require those, you're like, hey, guess what? I have 98 of them or something stupid like that. And you're like, yeah, you know what I mean? You're like, your primo status. It's awesome. So anyways, that would be my biggest recommendation. Do these 3 and then keep this pin as well, just in case you want a flame blade. Now these other ones, as far as notables, this is some big radishes, not to be confused with like regular hardy radishes. These are the big hardy radishes, but there's only like 1 or 2 of them here. It's kind of a garbage location. I just like it because I can be like bloop, 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 and then just warp back to the shrine is why I like it. But late game, it's kind of garbage. And we have, you know, if you really want hardy ingredients, there's better places. The best place though is right here. So again, if you're just, yeah, if all you're doing is these, you got all your bases covered. It's great. There is elemental shrooms and Saflinas in these spots. I can't even remember which one's which. Regardless, they're elemental stuff at both these locations. And the ingredients here are just kind of okay. It's just a little small spattering of stuff. Early game, it's awesome. Late game, it's kind of blah. Same thing down here. There's a bunch of ingredients. The most notable things here is the fact that there's a couple Fleet Lotus, like there's some clusters of like 6 or something like that. There's like 3 or 4 hardy durians here, and that's kind of it that's really notable here. There's some apples. Woo! Down here there's a bunch of stamina shrooms, but stamina shrooms, you know, once you start getting more stamina shrooms get worse and worse until eventually they're garbage. So you spend way too... The time you spent doing all this, instead you could have just been going to all the fairy fountains and getting all the enduring carrots instead, which are better. Like 1 enduring carrot can do the same thing as like 10 stamina shrooms, you know what I mean? Or more. Like the same thing as 20 stamina shrooms. Like, are you kidding me? With just 1 item and you can get 8 of them right here. It's just better. Just way better. So anyways, these are all kind of garbage now. So yeah, notable pins. This guy, these 4. There you go. And those are the things to note here. But yeah, that's pretty much Ridgeland. There's actually a lot of really good stuff here. So I know I kind of ranted for a while, but just lots of great stuff here that you can do. So at this point, I hopped down and gave myself some shock resistance by eating a food buff. So I just had one of those zap shroom dishes I made earlier in the game, and then this made me completely immune to all the electric attacks like I was talking about a little bit ago. So I farmed the electric keys wings by keeping the Wizrobes alive on purpose. So I just killed them until I had 15 electric keys wings. Then I also killed all of the Lizalfos in this area because I thought that all of them were yellow Lizalfos, and I was like, man, why are they only giving me regular Lizalfos tails? And then I realized after the fact that only 2 of them were yellow Lizalfos. The rest of them are all just regular Lizalfos. Even though some of them have shock arrows, they're not actually yellow Lizalfos. So I was collecting all their tails and stuff for no reason. So I wasted my time a little bit here. But anyways, that's what just happened in the recording. I'm going to just skip over all that. I talked about it. You'll understand what's going on. So next, I warped back to the tower, and I continued on towards the west to eventually get to the stable to the far west. Now, along the way, though, I am trying to get some of these Swift Violet that are up high on these mushroom things. and also there is usually some Fleet Lotus Seed here. Not always, but I'm just running through the shallow water here to try and collect that real quick. By the way, something to keep in mind is it was a thunderstorm a little bit ago earlier in this video when I was hunting those keys and stuff. I wanted to get that done because I was just trying to take advantage of it. But something else to know is when it is a thunderstorm, that any butterflies or darners in the area will always become the electric variant instead. So they'll be thunderwing butterflies or electric darners instead. So if you're wanting to get some of those to complete your compendium, that's how you find them. So just keep an eye out for them when it is a thunderstorm, especially when you know you're in a zone that has butterflies. So all the regular butterflies, whether they're warm or cold or whatever, will become the electric variant during a thunderstorm. So continue on towards the west until eventually you reach the Tabantha stable. Now, there's a shrine nearby which you should totally grab, so we have a warp point here, but we might as well do it real quick. It's not that hard. As a quick comment, though, is it does require a bunch of regular arrows, so if you are low, like I currently am, you may not be able to do this shrine in time, whatever. You might have to go, like, leave and go buy some more. So what you want to do is use stasis on the ball when it's up really, or giant orb, I guess I would say. Use stasis on the giant orb and then shoot it with arrows. It does take multiple of them to get it shooting in the correct direction, so I did have to do this a second time. So hopefully you get it the first time. Now, as a quick comment about this, just so you know, is any arrows that actually hit the orb will be consumed and they disappear, but any that miss and bonk against the wall will actually just tumble down into the slot below. So you can actually pick them up and then collect them again so you can try once more. So you actually, I guess you technically will only lose 2 arrows, I think. I don't think you can actually lose any more than that. Anyways, when you successfully hit the ball enough times, what'll happen is it will then bonk off the back wall and land forward, so it lands in the slot, which is great. So now that's what activates this nearby jumping platform. You want to use it to reach the area where the ball was bouncing as well. This will lead to a chest containing a topaz, which is kind of a mid-tier gem. It's kind of nice. We'll be using that to get some upgrades later on. Collect any arrows that you missed with, so as a result, you don't actually need that many arrows to complete this shrine. And you can use special arrows if it really comes down to it. I guess I technically have tons of bomb arrows. You want to return to the bouncy platform and then use it to hit the crystal switch that is hidden in an alcove just above the doorway that leads to the old bro. So that's what you do to open the door, and that completes this shrine. So I think that kind of concludes all of the Ridgeland stuff for now. There is some more things we can do here. However, those were the highlights as far as teleport points, etc. So now we're ready to continue on towards Tabantha, which I will be doing in the next video. Right about now is that time you click those buttons. You know, those certain buttons that want you to do things with them. It's happening right now. Not now is the time. You know what I'm talking about. As always, you guys are awesome. You have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.